last night and goes through today. We're going to look at legislative issues. People are going to be talking about procedural bar, where we're told it's too late to look at new evidence, even of innocence. We're going to talk about unanimous juries, where what does it mean that we give someone a death sentence when a jury is so divided on an issue? U.S. Supreme Court decisions, Florida Supreme Court decisions, governor's decisions to not grant clemency. These are all really important issues that the symposium will probably touch on at different points. We look at statistics about the death penalty, and as Dale made some comments, we also look at the death penalty up close and the different people it touches. Now, for this next half hour or so, we're going to be talking about the death penalty, and we're going to be able to talk to people who have been very closely and very personally touched by the death penalty. And they have witnessed how the death penalty affects the family members, both of the man who has been killed, as well as the family of the murder victims. I feel extremely honored to just have this space and time this morning for all of us to listen carefully and learn new ways of thinking about how the Florida death penalty has impacted the lives of the people on our panel this morning. Agnes Furey has gone through the horror of the murders of her 40-year-old daughter, Pat, and 6-year-old grandson, Chris, in 1998. Herb Donaldson has gone through the horror of the execution of his uncle, John Mills Jr., in 1996. And Fulton Wilson has experienced the horror of being on death row for 8 years and watching how the death penalty affected his family, especially his dear mother. I'm going to begin by asking our panelists some questions and giving them the opportunity to respond. And then we're going to make sure, if you're thinking of some questions as we're going through that you'd like to ask the panelists, I'll make sure that we have some time for the audience to ask the panelists their own questions. All right. So we'll go ahead and begin. I thought one of the first questions that I would love to know from the panelists is, if the state of Florida had not had the death penalty, how would your life have been different? Sure.
Good morning. I'm Fulton Wilson, and today is a good day, and I thank God for it and the opportunity to share with you all this day. She's asking, if it had not been for the death penalty, what changes or how would my life have went? Well, number one, I was raised in the country, and we were farmers. We raised just about everything we ate and tried to raise enough to sell enough so we could buy seeds and things for the next year. But everybody, or 99% anyway, will tell you that they're innocent when they appear before the judge. But I chose to try to save a brother. And things that happened in my life, and concerning the crime that I was not a part of, and then I was a part of because I was there. Okay, now we get this. Yeah. But I chose to tell them that I was with my brother, thinking that I could save him. Please don't think that I'm telling you all something that make myself look big or appear that I'm an innocent guy or all that, because I'm human just like you. I pray and I thank God for the day. I thank God for granting that I'm able to share with you all. Because I can honestly say that every guy you see on death row is not guilty. I can honestly say that. Now, it may be that he knows something concerning the crime, but everybody is not guilty. And just like he established there, when he was talking, there are innocent people that has been executed. And right off the tip of my tongue, I can name one guy, and you can check this for statistics. His name was Orion Johnson. That was my first cousin. They charged him with killing a high sheriff in Marion County and executed him. They took Orion to prison and raised him till he became 18 years old, then executed him. And then several years later, a guy was in California. I forget exactly what part. He told the father that he wanted to clear his conscience and told them he killed the man and told them where to go find his badge and his gun. And they did this. They found his gun and badge and thing using metal detectors because he had buried it. But my cousin, they executed him, and the state offered my aunt $10,000. That's what she got for it. Them killing her son. So it's innocent people on death row. And I think that it's a bad thing. I don't think that we were created to kill each other. You look at it and you say, well, look what he did. Most of the guys, I was there 8 years, most of the guys there has a mental problem. It's a sickness. We got some guys that come from the service. They just kicked them out. They train them for 4 years or more to kill. They make killing machines out of them. Then they turn them out here in population with people, But that don't justify killing another person. But it's wrong. It's wrong. Because there's no true way, if you didn't see it, that you can say, I did something. What the stage mind I was in when I did it,
Fulton, one of the things that you mentioned to me that sounded really important when we were talking earlier was how it affected your mom. And maybe because a lot of the people here are really thinking about families and how it affects brothers, nephews, mothers. What kind of, that there was a death penalty and that there was a death sentence, how did that affect your mom over the years?
Well, I watched my mother fade away. I was on death row 8 years. She was there every Sunday. And I watched my mother fade away. Her only concern when she come to see me was, I'm going to get my baby out of this. I said, Mama, we got to pray. We got to pray. I said, the same God that raised Lazarus from the dead, the same one that was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire furnace, that's the same God we serve. He loves us just as much as he do them. And we got to believe that. We got to trust in him. You say a lot of things sometimes, You say you want to be a crowd pleaser. You want to say what you think people want to hear. But I can honestly say, the God that I serve, he is my God. I come 47 minutes from dying in the electric chair. Didn't have no attorney, didn't have no money. And an attorney from Gainesville, Sealy Goldie, just volunteered and took my case and said, listen, Fulton, we ain't got a lot of time to talk because I got to fly to Washington and go before the United States Supreme Court and try to get you a stay of execution. I said, well, who's going to pay for this? He said, we'll worry about that when we get you off death row. And he did. You know, that's my reason. Hold on. That's my reason that I spend every day. Where my boss at? There she is. I spend every day doing everything that I can for anybody that need help. It ain't about charging them. I already owe more than I can pay because God saved me. I know that for a fact.
Thank you, Fulton. Yes, Agnes and Herb, and anything you'd like to add in terms of how, if there hadn't been a death penalty, how your life might have been different?
Well, if there had not been a death penalty, I would not have had the emotional turmoil of considering killing somebody else. Nor would my daughter's older children have to have dealt with that possibility. Her oldest son was in high school, and before he graduated, he wrote a paper on the effects of the death penalty.
There's a lot in that. How would my life have changed if there were no death penalty? For one, I honestly feel that I would be able to sit here like Fulton, and instead of seeing Fulton there, I would see my uncle. And it's been difficult, you know, for our family in regard to our uncle being lost. And I understand what you mean when you talk about, especially how it affects mothers. When I'm from Wildflowers County, and when my uncle was found guilty, they hustled him out of that jail so quickly. And I remember my grandmother was at our house, and she was standing in the living room area. There was a knock at the door. She opened the door, and it was a Wildflowers County Sheriff's deputy. And in a black garbage bag, he had all of my uncle's belongings. He pushed past my grandmother, walked into our living room, and dumped all of his items on the floor and walked out. And my grandmother fell to the floor and just wailed. And when you see something like that, when you witness it, and just like your mother, my grandmother was always there to visit my uncle. And I have these countless photos of us, of her, whenever we couldn't go with her to visit him. Somebody in the prison would take a picture of her, those little Polaroid shots with a little funky little background. If there were no death penalty, I honestly believe my uncle would be here. And I was born a few years after, 14 years around that, after he was. And so I was next in line after him. And when I think about, you know, that, he was really a big brother figure for me. So, I guess that's how my life would have changed if there were no death penalty.
I think one of the things that is unique to what you all can share with us this morning is if you met someone who was found themselves in the position you found yourself in, and they were going to be going through what you've gone through, what kind of guidance and support, what lessons would you share with them that you've learned along this journey?
I'm Fulton. I would, and I do it now. That's what I do, is go around and try to help guys. Let them know that, hey, it's a better way. Ask them to please, man, treat other people the way you want to be treated. You wouldn't want nobody to take anything from you or cut you or shoot you. So don't do that to other people. You know, right now, I haven't talked with my boss about it yet, but next week I have a great grandson in Marion County. They picked him up and he tested positive for smoking reefer. So my granddaughter called me and asked me would I come down there and talk with him. She said, Granddaddy said, if anybody can tell him what he doing wrong, it's you. I said, well, baby, if they'll give me that time off, I'll be down there and me and that guy will go take a fishing trip where it's just me and him. He don't have to be ashamed to say what's happening, you know, because I feel like he's troubled somewhere. You know, and I hope we can get him straightened out before he get where I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a big question, Susan. I'm grateful that I've had so many lessons, and I don't even know where to begin. But I guess one of the biggest things that I've learned is that we're all human, and we all affect each other on a moment-by-moment basis, whether we plan to or not. And we can make the choice as to whether that's a positive or a negative impact. And one of the things that in my conversations with the man who killed my kids has been that you can make a difference where you are. And he's accepted that challenge. And it's been difficult for him because the system doesn't particularly want him to make positive impacts. So it has been a challenge for him. And, you know, when we talk about the death penalty, it can't be fixed, so it has to be abolished. But as far as the rest of the system, it needs a lot of fixing too. And I don't know the answers to that, but I do know that we have to begin to acknowledge it and address it. The system is broken.
Thank you.
I guess I can only speak from the family perspective. A couple of years ago, I took Agnes as my guest. I did a TEDx Jacksonville talk, and the topic was how to survive an execution. And I think the talk that was earlier today, the address that was given, that there are no survivors of execution, and I understand that. But when it comes to family, some things that I've learned is that, one, you're going to be ignored for the most part. Everybody likes happy stuff. You understand? So they don't want to hear about death. They don't want to hear about hard times. They don't want to hear about any. They don't want to see you cry. When what's that thing? Don't never let them see you sweat. Never let them see you cry. You know, you gotta, you know. But they don't want to see that. So when you come forward with them, like, I'm feeling really rough because my uncle is going through it and he's about to lose his life. The state of Florida and the taxpayers of Florida are about to murder my uncle. And they have absolutely no proof that he did it. The man that pointed the finger at my uncle, he's got life in prison. The young lady who was 16 years old at the time, white female, is missing still. She's never testified. There's a missing person in my uncle's case. And still, he's killed for this murder. So one is to know that you're going to be ignored for the most part. And another thing that I talked about when Agnes was there is that you lose the power to forget. You lose the power to forget that there was a person here that you loved, that you cared about, that is gone because the people that you see every day, their tax dollars were put in to killing him. And you also might gain the power to forgive. You might gain it. There's no guarantee that you will ever forgive what happened to your loved one. A quick story. I used to go to a church in Tallahassee, and two of the people that went to that church were Bud and Kitty Childs. They were, Bud is the son of Lawton Childs, who was once our governor. And so I met Mr. Childs a couple of times. I remember going over to Bud and Kitty's home, seeing him there, and I knew him not well, but I knew him enough to say, that's him, and hello, how are you, and keep it moving. And this was the man that would sign, a death warrant for my uncle. So it's really weird to look at it, and that collision of emotions. He wasn't a bad guy. You know what I mean? He seemed like a nice gentleman every time I met him, but I know he had a job to do. I know that what's going on currently with Rick Scott, I can't even keep count of how many people he has literally murdered for everybody in this room. 22. And there's another interesting thing about them. So I'm going on topic.
Please, that's
but there's
why you're
another
here.
interesting
We
thing
wanna
about
hear.
this in Sheila Meehan. Sheila mentioned this at one of the other panels that we talked on, which I thought was fascinating. So fascinating that a woman in the audience couldn't believe it. That in the history of Florida's execution, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that no white person has ever been executed for the murder of a black person.
That is true.
And say that again? Did I get that right?
Vice versa. No black person has been executed for killing a white person.
No, that's right. No white person has ever been executed for killing a black person.
No black.
Did I get that right? Yes, okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
no black person in Florida has been executed.
yes, they
for
have.
killing
Black people
a
have
white
been
person.
executed. Yes, Agnes. We're getting there. We're on the same page, boo. We're on the same page.
But
Agnes and I have these conversations
a
often.
powerful fact.
I'm sorry?
A powerful fact you're bringing up,
Oh,
though,
yeah.
Herb, in terms going all the way back since we were even a territory. That's true, what you've been sharing with us.
So when this whole thing I'm from Wakulla County. I know you've heard some of the stories about Wakulla County. Come on. And they're not very pretty. They're not very pretty, but I think that's why we're here, and I think that's even. And I mentioned this last night that these panels, I know that they're needed, but it's hard to do because I have to see my uncle's face in my mind again when he was executed December the 6th, 1996, and I received a letter from him the very next day. So, and I read that, and he was just saying that he believed in me, that he loved me, and that consider this as if I was walking down the road with a backpack, and all the things that I do, all the places that I go, the people that I meet, those experiences I put in my backpack. And when I come to the end of that road and I meet my maker, I'm going to have to lay everything in that pack out on the floor. What will it say about me? What will it say about the life that I led? So when I think of Wakulla, I know that's why I'm there. I know that's why I'm there, to share this message, to introduce people to folk like you, and also to Agnes. We did readings of Wildflowers in the median there, because we wanted people to be aware of what is going on. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I apologize.
No, everything, that's why everybody is interested, because we don't get a chance. You guys have been through things that so many people haven't had to have. That really, Agnes, you want to tell us something?
One of the things that was really important for me in the very early days, 2 or 3 days after they were killed, I was sitting in a police station in Sarasota with a detective who had just hung up the phone from talking with Leonard's grandmother. And we forget, and it impacted me something that it still stays with me, is that this woman got a phone call that was as traumatic for her as it was for me. She had a heart attack while she was on the telephone.
Oh, my
It
goodness.
wasn't part of her life plan either.
Right.
And I just, at that moment, it just really struck me that this is part of a human thing. Family thing.
And you're really bringing us to right up to one of the other questions I had for each of you was truly that each of you in a different way has faced some of the biggest pain and challenges that life has to throw at us. And I'd just like to ask you to share with us, where did you get the strength to keep on keeping on?
My name's Fulton. I gained all my strength from my church sisters and brothers and from the Lord. There has been times in my life when I was alone and had no resources for whatever my problem may have been, but I found peace by praying. And just not rambling, hopefully, but when they signed my death warrant, I was in one of those little cells you're talking about. And I sat there and tears went to running from my eyes, and the only hope or help that I could see then was pray. And I got on my knees and I prayed. And less than an hour and a half after then, the officer came by and told me to get dressed. A lawyer was out there to see me. So God heals a sinner's prayer. What we got to do, ain't no need of asking anything of the Lord if you don't believe he's going to do it. Because if you don't believe it, he's not coming. It's your faith.
Well, on some days, I think that what kept me going was that there really wasn't any alternative. But to put one foot in front of the other, get up, show up, go to work. In fact, contrary to most belief, I think one of the things that kept me going early on was that I went back to work very quickly. Had I stayed home for 3 months, which was recommended to me, I think I would have been in worse shape.
You kept the routine.
Yeah. Although I will say that there were many, many months that there was weekends that I never got out of bed for 2 days.
Yeah. I hear you.
But I went to work every day. And then I stayed in bed for 2 days.
I was in New York, and one of the things that kind of, a few things kept me going. One is New York, and my uncle's letter, of course, when I received it, coming back, visiting, and being with my family, and knowing that I just had to do something for them, you know what I mean? I had to be there in some way. I couldn't just be vacant and absent. And also writing, because my uncle kept so many journals. I got like those legal pads and stuff. I have about 45 of them at the house that he just wrote. And I put a lot of them in the book that I wrote about him and his case. So reading those and just remembering certain things about him and where his mindset was while he was on death row. And also other writers, like specifically writers like Richard Wright or James Baldwin, Chester Himes, because even though we're discussing this whole thing about black men, death row, or anybody on death row, I'm just saying black men in particular, this is nothing new for us. This is nothing new for us that there are literally books and, articles and everything that go back that say this thing is constant. For some reason, we will kill more readily than we will save. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I've got some other questions, but I want to make sure that I also kind of maybe pause here. If the audience, if you've had a question, I have some more I can ask, but is there something that's been on anybody's mind? If you do, raise your hand and I'll bring my mic over to you. Has anybody had a question that they'd like to ask any of our panelists?
Mr. Wilson, how lonely was prison for you? How lonely was prison for you?
Very, very lonely, because you're dealing with different personalities. You know, when you first get to death row, all you think about then is you don't want to die. You know, but once you've been there little over 6 months or better, death get to be the second thing in life. You know, we sat back there and we play checkers and we play cards, and everybody got a different story they want to run, and you know, so you make it home until the only thing snap you out it when they sign your death warrant. It gets serious then, you know. But I come from a praying family. I come from a family that truly believe that if they pray and trust in God and do His will, that He'll answer your prayer. And that's the thing that my mother would instill and drive home, you know. But
Fulton, in addition to the loneliness, I know you shared with me that maybe tell them a little bit about one of the most difficult things after the visit was over.
yeah, that I'm gonna tell you, that still hurts. You hate to see them leave, you know. You look forward to seeing them, and then when time go to leave, everybody crying. You know, whether you and it's out of control, you know. You're not hollering and boo-hooing, but tears are flowing, you know. And to see my mother every week, you could see the wear and the tear on her. It was tearing her up, you know. And I had that guilty feeling. I said, nah, I'm doing this to her, you know. And that's one of the reasons today that I will not, under any circumstances, do anything to you or anyone else that I don't want done to me. And I honestly try to live by that. I don't mind saying I'm wrong. I don't mind saying, hey, man, hey, forgive me for this. And if there's anything I can do, you know, to make up for this, say so. You know, because I learned the hard way that what I say and what I do is two different things. I can say anything, but then do it. You know, I get up in the morning and hard wind or something done blowed a limb down in some older person yard or something. I want to go do it. I want to move it. I want to do something. I want to reach out to anybody that I can. I ain't got that pride by, well, hey, I can't do that there, and I want to reach out, you know.
Thank you, Fulton. Let me bring this over so everybody can hear your question.
For all three of you, I was just wondering, prior to the situation that kind of, you know, your children dying, your uncle, and your incarceration, prior to all of that in your life, were you for or against the death penalty?
Well, you saying prior to, I had a first cousin, you know, that I was telling you got executed. And then the guy that committed the crime, you know, fessed up to it and told him where to go find the high sheriff's gun and badge and thing. Well, before that, I don't think I really gave it any thought, you know. It's when it came home that I recognized it, and I seen the way. This was way back in the 50s. They was literally burning you up in the electric chair. I mean, it was if that had happened today, they probably wouldn't even open the casket. You know, it was cruel and thing, you know. But before that, you know, I really hadn't given it any thought.
No, I have to say it was not on my radar. What I will say is that I was well aware of some of the discrepancies in our criminal justice system. Some years before that, I was mugged in the street, and a group of adolescent boys had snatched my purse, and I wound up on the sidewalk, and of course I reported it, and they had run. And officers arrived in front of my house in a police car, and I told them what had happened. And maybe 45 minutes later, they came back, and their car was full of young African-American adolescent boys. And they fully expected me to identify all of them so that they could arrest them. And I couldn't do that. And they were very unhappy with me. But they had gone down the street to where those kids were shooting baskets, across the street from the projects. Well, of course they must be the same kids that, you know, snatched your purse. Now, maybe they were and maybe they weren't. But I didn't even see all of them, but I certainly couldn't say that every kid in the back of that police car was guilty of snatching my purse and throwing me to the ground. But it was pretty obvious that that was an expectation. So I hadn't thought about the death penalty per se, but I had given quite a bit of thought to the discrepancies in our system.
I'm not a different bird, but when I was, you know, a kid, I looked strange. My voice sounded strange. My mannerisms were odd. So whenever I think the first time I ever saw anything that had to do with an execution might have been, I want to say Spinkalink. Does that name sound familiar? And I didn't really grasp what it was, and especially later on when Ted Bundy was on the scene and all those things that were happening there. And I remember probably like some of you when I don't know, it was ABC or somebody did a special and they interviewed him, you know, like a few minutes before the end, that sort of stuff. And I don't know, I always looked at the outsiders in a way of being misunderstood folk. And I know that sounds kind of corny, I know that sounds kind of strange, but I always felt that before we murdered or executed someone, I just felt there was something more to learn about the human spirit. There was something more to learn about the human workings. You know what I mean? We can't blame somebody like Hitler for all of their murders when we look at what we've done to our Native American populations. You know what I mean? Or what we did to the Tuskegee Airmen with this whole syphilis thing. So when I look at how I may have felt about the death penalty, I'm kind of like, who should we? Why would we have the right to kill anyone after all the stuff we've done? You know, why? I'm sorry, I'm rambling again. I can't.
No, I think sometimes you underestimate how much we do desire to hear, because you're saying a lot. And I think one of the things I've been hearing too from this last question is that a lot of us, it's not on our radar, or we may have some kind of general thoughts about, you know, who are we, what gives me the right to do this, but a lot of times we haven't given it a lot of thought until for some reason it falls right in our lap.
I don't think we've learned how to give it a lot of thought. You wouldn't have racial issues in this country if we gave it thought and dealt with it and try to at least understand one another. But we want to put up that wall that stops us from going a little bit further. You know, and it's the same thing I feel with the death penalty. There's too much to look at with it, you know, because we are all involved in it. If for us to have to be put, if you're on a jury, to have to be put in a position of whether you will allow somebody to live or allow somebody to die is a horrible place to be, you know, to be put into. But at the same time, you have this person who murdered someone or who may have murdered someone. Something should be done, correct? Justice, in a sense, should be served, but I don't think we understand justice. I think we've got words for it. I think we've got these little laws and everything, but we don't understand justice, and then we turn around in the same breath, God is the judge, but I'm going to kill you anyway. It's such a hypocritical thing about us. Does that make sense?
It does, and
The whole thing of it not being on people's radar is very true. Because I'm thinking, you know, Good Shepherd, we have a huge parish of faith-filled, many faith-filled, committed Christians. And I always wonder, why aren't there 500 people in this room? Involved in lots of ministries, helping the poor and the homeless, and a lot of social justice issues. And yet this issue, you know, it's kind of the core group that are, for whatever reason, and I think George is going to talk about this, feel called to this. Like, we feel the Lord has convicted us that this is wrong. This has to stop. But, you know, my humanness wants 500 more people to be in this room, hearing Dale, hearing all of you. And, you know, it's like preaching to the choir.
And
That makes sense.
it does, and I'm going to need to kind of wrap us up, but we're going to be moving towards lunch, which means for at least a few minutes, I don't know how fast we're losing everybody, that you may be able to have a moment to come up after we formally close. But I want to just say that we've been talking about this isn't on our radar until it comes close. And I really was touched by what I heard, I think each of you say today, which is it is not easy to come to this panel, to give your time, to stir it all up again. But you each made that time and made that sacrifice this morning so that each of us, it would be on our radar, that we now have faces and pictures and stories and real people and the pain and real pain to bring it up close so that it's on our radar, and hopefully the person next to us in the pew or the next person we meet at Mass, that it may be on the radar, that we're going to start talking about it, and that's because you made the sacrifice today. So if everybody would join me in thanking our panel.
Thank you. Can I, is it possible that, can I say something
Of course you
very
can,
quickly?
Herb.
I had the honor, I know everybody's got a munch and crunch. I had the honor once of meeting a woman by the name of Mamie Till Mobley. She was actually the mother of Emmett Till. And one of the things that she did when her son was found murdered, he was 14 years old, I believe, was that she held an open casket because her words were, I want the world to see what it did to my son. Okay? My question to you would be, would you be offended if we actually showed executions on national televisions when they occurred? And I know that sounds brutal. I know that sounds ugly. But if we're going to kill somebody collectively with our tax dollars, we should be able to face it up front. Right? Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to be here, guys. Appreciate it.